First we'll set up Blender. When it comes to scale, and we'll go to Scene Properties, Units, and Unit System. If we work in a unit system of none, we would need to treat it as centimeters. Now if we want to do any rendering or calculations, say you're trying to do cloth, drape cloth, or run a physics simulation on some of these objects, if you model it in the unit system of none as if it were centimeters, the objects are actually going to be in meters. Just keep that in mind. Lighting and physics won't calculate correctly. Now if we use the metric system and we do it in meters, what we do here will translate exactly into meters in a unit scale of none, which is weird because if it's 8 meters by 8 meters by 18 meters in the metric system, when you convert it to none, it'll be 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters by 18 centimeters. And if we were to use centimeters, we would need to scale it up 100 times before we kicked it out to a Blender unit or unit system of none. Let's go ahead and create a cube. And I'm going to do it in centimeters. So we'll go ahead and create a cube, and I'm going to make this cube 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters by 18 centimeters. Now, it's really small, and we'll apply our scale and rotation. And then we'll scale it up 100 times and apply our scale and rotation again. Now if we switch it to none, it's 8, 8, and 18. We could just work like this, as long as we don't have to light or render here in Blender. Before we can make some materials, we're going to need to create a texture. I'm going to create a color grid, and I will make probably a very white, maybe not pure white, speck material and a flat normal. So first we'll go ahead and in Blender we'll go ahead and create a new, and we're in the image tab, we'll create a new color grid and give it a name. I've already made one, so I'll use it. Color grid. It's 1024 by 1024. It doesn't need to be huge. And then I'm going to kick this out. So let's jump over to shading, and if it's not here, add it to there. All right, this little image icon, and then we'll drop the hamburger button down and go to image, save as. And I'm going to find a folder. Now I've made one. It's in my modding folder under source and cube demo, and I'm just going to name this color grid. I'm going to go ahead and export this out. So we'll put it in the same place as our color grid. And then we can open up Photoshop or GIMP. I'll go through Photoshop real quick. Alright, so I need to export or save as, and we're going to want to save this as an Intel TextureWorks DDS file. If you have the NVIDIA Texture Tools exporter, there's an issue with it when it comes to your spec. So we'll go ahead and select the Intel TextureWorks DDS, and this is going to be our color grid DDS, but I'm going to use a suffix, so at the end of it, color grid, we'll do an underscore and a lowercase d. That'll be our diffuse texture. Alright, let's go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to fill that with mostly white, and I'm going to save that as the spec, so we'll do underscore s. And we need a normal, so what I'll do is I'll create a new layer once I'm completed here. So we'll just save that. I'm going to pick a color. It's going to be 128 by 128 by 256. And that'll give us a flat, like mid-level normal map with no detail. I'll hit OK. and we can fill. Let's go ahead and save this. And we will change our suffix to in. Next, we need to move our textures into our Fallout 4 data textures folder. If you don't have it, go ahead and make it. I've got a folder for my props and my collision demos, and I'm just going to move those files. Well, I'm actually going to copy them and paste them right in there. Let's make a simple material using the textures that we just relocated. Let's go to File, New, and here we should be in the Material tab, but if we're not, just switch over to it. We're going to leave the general settings alone, and then for diffuse, we'll go ahead and select our directory for our textures, my props, and my collision demos, and I'm going to start adding these files. So I'll add the diffuse, then I'll add the normal, and then I'll add the smooth spec. Next, let's scroll down and enable specular. And we're not going to adjust anything here. We're going to leave it. We're going to leave that set to white. Our smoothness we could drop a little. Let's say 0.7. You might not notice a change. Everything else we're going to leave the same here. So our wet spec settings we'll leave alone. Anything that says wet we're just going to leave alone for now. A little further down, we can cast shadows. And we may also want to receive shadows. If it's not a thing that receives shadows, like if it's emissive, then don't do that. Emittance is for transparency, and we'll go over that in a bit. That's it. We don't need to do anything else here. We can go to File and Save As. Now we need to save it in that Fallout 4 data materials folder. If you don't have a materials folder, go ahead and make it. And then we'll add our folders to it. And I'm going to call it My Cube Material. Alright, in NifSkope, let's go ahead and open our file. So I'm going to navigate to our folder. Alright, so let's open our file. And it should be hot pink. That's okay. Let's take a look. We can expand each of these, or we can just hit this, and that'll expand the entire set of nodes. Each one of these is a node. This is our root. This is our object, and if it doesn't say BS tri-shape, then we might not have set our export settings correctly. If it's not BS, we need to go back to Blender and export with the Fallout 4 setting. This is our shader material that we set up. Well, not yet, but this is where our material is going to go. And this is where we add our textures. Before we do that, let's go ahead and select our node, which is our scene root. And we can rename that by clicking that little text button there. I'm not going to. I'm going to leave it alone. And the first thing I'm going to do is right click on it, block, insert, Bethesda, BSX flags. Now this is going to allow me to set up some settings. So I'll navigate over here into our block details. Now this section up here is our block list. So in our block details, I'll go ahead and click this flag. I'm going to set Havoc and Dynamic because I'm just going to want to pick this thing up and throw it around. I'm not really going to do anything with it or put it in my inventory. Well, maybe we will later. So it's basically just going to be clutter we can move around. Next, we're going to select our 9 node again. And if we look down in our block details, we can see the num extra data list. Double click in there and type 1 because we're going to add to it. So if for some reason yours was a different number, you would just add 1 to it. I'm going to click the little green refresh arrows right below that in the extra data list. And you'll notice a little white side arrow pops up. Go ahead and click it. Double click in here and add 1. This is not arbitrary. We are taking the number that is right next to our BSX flags. So if it's not 1 for you, then you would type that number in here. You'll notice that it says BSX. If it doesn't, we need to make sure that it matches that ID. Next, let's add our material. With our 9 nodes selected, let's go ahead and select header. And then under strings, we're going to want to change this location. Now, we don't have a little button to navigate to, so the easiest way to do that is we will open up, let's open up our, which one am I looking for? I'm looking for the material. So we want data, not textures, materials, my props, collision demos, or wherever you have put yours, and I'm going to select that. Right click it, copy as path. I don't want the whole path, so I'm just going to paste it here in the address bar and select, and I don't want the quotes. Right there at the end of the .bgsm, and I'm going to select all the way back to, I think it's my props. If it doesn't work, then I can go all the way back to materials, but I believe it's my props. So I'll copy that. Double click and I'll paste it here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate back to my block list. I'm going to expand all of this. And I'm going to go ahead and set those textures. So I'll navigate to my props, collision, and the first one is going to be my diffuse. The second one is going to be my normal. Now let's put that in, it's going to go in the 8th slot. Alright, so it's set up, may not look quite right, but that's alright. Should work just fine for us. Next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to select our object, and then let's go to our BS try shape here in our block list. Right click, block, insert, havoc, BHK collision object. Alright, so we need to add our collision object to our 9 node. So the first thing we'll do is select our 9 node, come down here to our block details and find collision object. Now we can select, or make it easy, type the number 3 because that is the ID for our BHK collision object. So we'll type 3. It goes ahead and assigns it, and that's nice. Next thing we'll do is we'll select our collision object. We'll right click, block, insert, havoc, and we want a rigid body. So we want it to move, so we want the rigid body T. Now, we don't have a shape yet, but if we select our collision object, we can also set our target. So let's do that. That's going to be our scene root, which is 0. And then our body is going to be 4. And those are assigned. Next, let's right click, block, insert, havoc, and let's do a box shape. So it's BHK box shape. Now we're probably not going to see it right away. But while we have it selected, Let's go ahead and select the material FO format underscore none. Go ahead and double click and then hit the drop down. Here we can pick whatever material our object tends to be most like. We'll do paper box small. Alright, next thing we need to do is assign our shape to our rigid body. So let's drop down the little arrow here next to our collision object, select our rigid body, and where it says none, let's type that. Now see, our numbers are changing, so you have to pay attention to them. Now our box shape is now 4, and it'll assign it, but we can't see it, it's super small. So let's select it, and that's our dimensions right here. I don't know what they're going to be, but I'm going to start small, so 0.5, and that's actually rather huge. So I'm thinking maybe, let's try 0.05. And then for the depth, maybe 0.125. Oh, that was close. But I can't see it, so I know it's inside. So let's try 2.7. Oh yeah, that made that. That's still inside. That's actually probably exactly what I want. Because there's a bit of a bubble, from what I understand. And that is that value there. So, just want to see the collision object so we can understand what we're looking at. There we go. Alright, so if we deselect it, it's red. I want it a little smaller, so I am going to tuck it back in there. So I'm going to say 0.055, 0.055, and 0.1265. So now that sits just inside our object. Next thing I need to do is select the inode, and we can right click in the viewport, go to sanitize and reorder blocks, and that'll reorder everything for us and make it so that it's nice and clean and structured right. You can also get to that through spells, sanitize, reorder blocks. At this point we're done with NifSkope, so we can go ahead and save as. And now we want to save it somewhere in our Fallout 4 directory. And we're going to optimize it using Elric, so we're not going to want to put it in its home. For that, we'll create an optimize folder. So I'll just select that optimize. And that's where I'm going to put it. With Elric opened up, we need to set our output directory. It's going to go into our Fallout 4 data folder. I have a meshes folder there, my props, collision demo. That's where it's going to kick the file to when it's converted it or optimized it. I'm going to go ahead and click convert files. I'm going to find the, it's already here for me because I've been doing stuff, but we're going to go into the optimized folder and make sure we select the right file. If everything goes well, there'll be a little green box. With Fallout 4 creation kit open, we need to make sure that we have the Fallout 4 ESM loaded. That's all we want. I've already opened it. I'm going to go ahead and open up, I'm going to jump to the garage and sanctuary. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find an object that's very similar to our box, and I'm going to do a static object first, or a movable static. So I want to find I think it's a cardboard box. Yeah, it's the cardboard box empty. So we could easily just preview it. It's a little bigger, but that's fine. It's the data type that I want to use. So I'll duplicate it. And for the duplicate, right here. Make sure you're on the right one. Double click it, and let's type our I'm just going to call it my product box. Alright, so some of this kind of doesn't matter. Maybe it does. I'm going to go ahead and let's load the model. So we'll navigate to edit, edit, and then I actually called it cube. So let's find our collision demo and cube.nif. If everything is correct, we should see it. It's a little hard to navigate this little window. So I'm just going to hit OK. And with that, I'm also going to hit OK. Now, I don't want to create a new form because I did a duplicate. So, no. And then, am I sure? Yes. Now, if you didn't duplicate it, then you don't want to do that. Now I'm going to take my cardboard box. Let me find it. My product box. I'm going to drag it into the scene. Press Z and drag it up some. And that looks... Ooh. That looks good. That looks about right. Let's go ahead and create the version of our box that's going to allow us to pick it up and put it in our inventory. So for that, let's use a miscellaneous item or a misc item. And I think the alarm clock, that was there. There's no space. Okay, so the alarm clock, and the icon looks like, to me, a bag of gems that's spilled. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I don't want to double click it. Let's go ahead and right click it and duplicate. I'll go ahead and rename it. So this will be my pickup box, and I don't want any spaces. Pickup box. And then the name will be my pickup box. And then I need to change the model. So let's go ahead and click edit a couple times. Grab our model. Looks about right. And we're not creating a new form because we duplicated. And yes, we're sure. Alright, so now I should have... I'm pressing Z to place these. And you know, I could also just drag it above the ground and hit Havoc. And it'll do a physics calculation to the ground. Whoops. Alright. Let's save. And now it's going to ask us to create our plugin name. So we'll just call this collision demo. With Fallout 4 open, navigate to the mods section. Now go to load order. And let's turn our collision demo on. Now we can hit the back button a couple times, select OK, and test this out in game. And we should have both objects. One of them will allow us to pick it up, and you can see its name. I'll go ahead and pick it up. The other will allow us to, you know, grab it, move it around. And if we go into our inventory, it's under MISC. No. Junk. It's in junk. My pickup box. And I can inspect it.